Great. Well, I think today a lot of people have spoken about the urgency for us to meet the climate challenge, and this is a mindset that I'm going to put forward today that can enable all of us to do so. So I'm going to briefly start by just introducing Willicroft. We've had a very short introduction just then. I then want to talk about the ethics behind our business, the appointment of Mother Nature, and finally finish on intergenerational thinking, which really encapsulates the whole piece. So first up, Willicroft was actually a dairy farm that my grandparents started in 1957 in the UK. I didn't grow up on that farm, but I spent a lot of time there. It's a beautiful, holistic farm in Devon. I think it's what we all believe every farm looks like. That was that kind of farm. In 2018, however, I moved to Amsterdam, and I began to eat a mainly plant-based diet, which was a great confliction to my upbringing. But I'd found that to be a very formative upbringing, and so I was very respectful of the role that my grandparents had played on putting food on the table. And so when I started a plant-based cheese company in Amsterdam in 2018, I wanted to bring forward a lot of the values that they had put forward, because I think a lot of people feel that plant-based and dairy have to be two polar opposite things, but I think there can be a lot of common ground there. So we always say Willicroft was established in 1957, but reimagined in Amsterdam in 2018. So this is our range of plant-based cheeses. We have a range predominantly based on beans and pulses, and you're going to be able to try two of these options later today. So very few people know this, but cheese is actually the third highest emitting ingredient after beef and lamb. So it's a bit of a sort of guilty pleasure that slips under the radar. The emissions of the cheese that is consumed in Europe are the equivalent to Belgium as a country. So it's quite a staggering amount of emissions. So the way in which we measure our success as a business is emissions avoided, not by revenue, not by number of products sold, but by emissions avoided. So we look at the cheese that we are replacing, be it a feta or a Gouda. Those are the two we're going to be trying today. We compare it to the dairy Gouda that we're replacing, or the dairy feta. We minus the two, and then we look at our revenue. And it's a very powerful way of encouraging the two most important metrics of a business, which is to generate revenue, but also to improve your impact. So we wanted to go a step further when we introduced this metric, and in 2020, we made Mother Nature our CEO, which on the face of it might sound very nice and attractive, but you were probably rightly asking, what does that actually look like in practice? So I'm going to run through a few examples today of how we've actually put that into fruition. So the first thing that we did is we started out producing our products using cashews, and we switched onto beans and pulses, which actually lowered our emissions by up to 6 times on the previous products that we were replacing. And I think the most important thing that any business can do, no matter what industry, is measuring your emissions, because until you know the impact that you're actually creating, you're really pulling a number out of the hat, and you don't know where you stand in terms of the impact that you can actually create. So for us, this was a massive eye-opener, measuring our emissions. And we now have products that are between 4 to 6 times lower than the cheeses that we are replacing. We also became the first B Corp in Europe that's a plant-based cheese company. The B Corp movement, I'm guessing most of you are familiar with. I think there are also some B Corps in the room today. It's essentially the most holistic label that looks at every facet of your business, from your team members to the impact you're making to your suppliers. And it's really a stamp of approval that you're doing things the right way. Like any label, it doesn't cover absolutely everything, but it's certainly the most holistic one out there. And it's a good stamp that you're on the right track. So the B Corp has a mission lock within it that every company has to sign up to, and that basically looks at a multi-stakeholder approach, which is something I'm going to come on to later, because I think too many businesses are focused on really just driving revenue. Another great thing about the B Corp movement is their net zero commitments. I think we've heard of some net zero commitments today, which is really positive. They have an initiative committing the companies to a 2030 target. It's not mandatory, but a lot of the companies have signed up to it. And then the next steps that we are taking is We now have about 20 investors as part of Willicroft. All of them are committed to divesting away from oil and gas and other such polluting industries within the next 3 years. So any investor in Willicroft has to move their portfolio away from those investments. In terms of steps from here, in 2024, we're locked into having an impact board. So that impact board will basically ensure that every decision the company makes is checked by the impact board to ensure that it is in keeping with our values. And then the step further from there will be a golden share, where we will appoint a organization or an individual who we believe to have the strongest ethics and values, who will basically be able to block any non-impact related decision from going through. So we've actually gone a step further than having Mother Nature as our own CEO and actually created a movement. So on the right-hand side here, you'll see the CV which we wrote on behalf of the planet. This so far has led to 15 companies signing up, and there are basically 3 core requirements that each company has to make. So the first one is quite simple. You just make the appointment. The second one is signing up to an external accreditation within 2 years. So it could be B Corp, it could be the organic label, it could be fair trade, for example. And then the third one is we have quarterly group sessions with the community, and you have to present at least one initiative that you've put forward that is positive to the planet in between each quarter, which is then cleared by the rest of the community. So some of the actions that some of our members have taken so far, one of the companies was the first company to grow ginger in the Netherlands. They are a juice producer, and they went out to some farmers and found some farmers who could grow ginger in the Netherlands, which dramatically lowered their footprint. Another company is now fully circular. It's a fashion brand. They make reusable baby wear that you rent until your baby has outgrown that baby wear, and it's a fully circular business. In terms of where we want to go next, I think this movement can apply to a lot of different organizations, and yeah, we definitely are looking for more members, and we were actually going to appoint someone full-time to manage this community in the not-too-distant future. So I want to wrap up with intergenerational thinking, which is definitely something that I have not created, but I have been very much inspired by. And I think this timeline really encapsulates why we need to think a lot bigger than 5-10-year cycles. Essentially, we are at a point here where we are at a very early age of humanity's potential time span. Homo sapiens first came onto the planet 300,000 years ago, but really only 250 years ago did we begin to industrialize, and at the present day, if we look at the average mammalian lifespan, we have a minimum 400,000 years left if we play our cards right. But we could have a hell of a lot longer if we live as long as the sun can foreseeably give light to the planet. So I guess the basic notion here is we shouldn't just be thinking about the present day, the next 10 years, the next 50 years, but the huge number of people that are going to be coming next, because of the potential people that could live just if we had a sort of steady rate of population. So if population stayed the same for the next 400,000 years, then those alive today will be outnumbered 1 to 1,000, which is quite a staggering stat. So we have a big responsibility, I think, on our shoulders. There's already people who are really showing that, and this was an example of some students in the US who have actually taken the US government to court because they feel that their future is being put in doubt. If there's one book above all I can recommend, it is this one, which encapsulates the Mother Nature movement, but also the whole notion of intergenerational thinking. This author centers most of his argument around a tribe, that every decision that they make is with 7 generations in mind, and it's sort of called cathedral thinking. So the idea that you will start putting a brick into the soil, maybe not seeing the final piece, but being okay with that. And some examples of companies that have done this: some are now leaving empty chairs in boardrooms to embody the people coming in the future that don't have or didn't have a decision until today. Also, we've seen the launch in the last 2 years of the International Solidarity Index, which basically looks at how a country looks after its people. And I think no surprises there in terms of what countries are right at the top. So just to close, I think the best example of what I've talked about today is what Patagonia have just recently done. Yvon Chouinard has just given his entire stake, it's a private business, to a charity, which will then ensure that this environmental charity will make all of the decisions in line with environmental sort of thinking. And I think that, to me, is responsible capitalism. And this proverb really hits the nail on the head. So if anyone wants to join the movement, you can do so via here. We have a stall just behind this wall here where we're going to be sampling 2 of our cheeses. It's been a real privilege to have this stage, and thank you to the organizers for having me. So thank you very much.